Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine and Real Estate. Thank you so much for joining on this very bright Friday evening that feels like the middle of the day right now, but I know it'll get dark in a second. We will go ahead and dive in. Many of you were on the call last week where we sort of walked through the numbers for real estate investing, and hopefully that sparked some ideas and some excitement for you guys and sort of helped you to see that it goes way beyond that monthly cash flow and that owning income property has a ton of other benefits. So hopefully that sort of sunk in for everyone who's been considering it. I am trying to, admit people, and it's not letting that happen. I apologize. And, well, I'll figure that out. So this week is going to continue from the conversation last week. So to start, for those of you who are new or who haven't had a chance yet to attend Wine and Real Estate, these used to be in-person sessions that I would hold around the triangle, and we would meet and talk about different real estate investing topics and give folks a chance to ask questions or share numbers from their deals or try to figure out if the deals that they were looking at were worth pursuing, etc. And now we're online, which is actually great because some of you are not in the triangle, and the goal is to get the info out to as many people as possible so that you can make changes in your communities. And yeah, here we are. So again, the goal is to take smoke and mirrors out of owning real estate, whether that be primary residence, whether that be investment property. My goal is for everyone to own something, whether it's the roof over your head. I mean, everyone on this call is paying someone's mortgage right now. If you have a roof over your head and you're paying a monthly fee to have that roof over your head, you're paying someone's mortgage. And my whole thing is, why not let that mortgage be your own? Whether that's your primary residence, whether that's a multifamily that you're living in and renting out, or whether that's another property that you own that someone else is paying the mortgage for you on, why not let that mortgage be your own that's getting paid off? So this is a safe space to ask questions. The only rule we have is that there is no silly question, and I promise you, if you have a question, there are countless others on the phone right now on this call who probably have the same question and they just haven't gotten around to asking, so ask away. Hopefully we'll have the answer. If we don't have the answer, we can point you in the right direction. As always, you can find information on these posted on Instagram. My page is Rebellious Investor, on Facebook at Tiffany Elder. And I'm growing the email list from those of you who have subscribed. So hopefully you got emails for this session, and I'll be sure to send out. I do want to apologize because I realized that the last session that we had 2 weeks ago, I referenced next week as being the next session, which would have been last week. And again, these are going to be every other week, at least in the short term, until something changes that. So I apologize if I confused anyone on the timing for when this one was going to take place. And as always, grab your cups, glasses, anything that you have for a toast. Since this is Wine and Real Estate, I need to see those in the air. Thank you all for joining me this Friday night. This is a toast to knowledge and each one teach one, and to success in your real estate endeavors. Cheers. And just to make sure the chat is working, if you'd like to just post in the chat where you're calling in from. It's always great to see where everyone's from and to make sure messages are coming through. But I saw Sheila's first post, so awesome. We got Durham, Atlanta, Greensboro. Hey, Flo. Cary, Durham, Raleigh, Richmond, Virginia. Yay. New Jersey. So we're from a few different places here. So keep in mind that a lot of the information that we share here is general in nature. If you're outside of North Carolina, some of the specifics that we share might be different in practice in your state. So before you dive into a real estate venture, make sure to build your team. We're going to talk about building your team. Just make sure that anything that you step into is appropriate for your state laws. And let's see. Going back to last week. So 2 weeks ago, there I go again. Going back to 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, we walked through numbers so that y'all could understand what the benefits are for real estate investing. And I want to give you guys sort of a couple plain day, real world examples of sort of those benefits. So we walk through when you buy an income property, that first chunk of benefit that you can expect is from cash flow. Then we also talked about equity growth. We also talked about depreciation and interest and other tax write-offs. Check with your CPA on those. We also talked about principal payoff, and so all of those lumped together, we were able to see what the full benefits are. A good friend of mine, Aaron, suggested, hey, can you share some examples from your clients or from some of your deals that can sort of show those numbers in real life? So I just want to give you two examples. And I didn't see his name pop up. One of them is a client of mine, Lem. So, and he's a good example as well, because he bought his first properties and didn't lay eyes on them. He was actually overseas working in the military when he bought his first real estate investment properties here in the Triangle. The very first one was a quad in Raleigh. Then we did a single family home in a revitalizing area in Durham, East Durham. Then he bought a duplex in Durham. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the duplex he bought. He bought the duplex years ago. It was $155,000. When he bought it, the rents were $1,500 gross rents. So he was getting $750 on each side on $155,000 purchase price, which a lot of people, when they buy investment property, they might follow certain equations like 100 times gross rent multiplier, et cetera. Just keep in mind, those equations are just sort of textbook, a starting point. A lot of times you won't be able to follow those exact formulas depending on your market, and that doesn't mean it's not a good deal. It just means that your market may have progressed past the point where that formula works. That's why you just need to have a good team and a good property manager, which we'll talk about soon, to help you out and make sure that that property makes sense. But his purchase price was $155,000. That was in 2015. At the time, he was getting $750,000 a side. These were either two bedroom, two bath, or two bedroom, one bath units. And fast forward, in 2018, he called me and said he had come back from work overseas. He wanted to switch careers. And he said, Tiff, is there a property in my portfolio that makes sense for me to divest from and take the cash so that I can invest it into a business? He had found a thrift store that he wanted to buy, and he didn't want to go in his pocket for the down payment. He wanted to pull the funds out of one of his properties and keep the others as income property. So fast forward 3 years. So he bought the property in 2015 for $155,000. It was $1,500 a month gross rents, which was giving him cash flow from the start. His cash flow had grown a little bit over those 3 years, and he ended up selling them for $205,000 in 2018. So the rents had risen a couple $100, and keep in mind, he had a 30-year fixed mortgage. So his mortgage payment was the same, aside from a little fluctuation from a property tax increase. But he was pocketing a couple $100 more per month, which is a few thousand dollars more per year just owning it. And he was able to sell the property and take just under $40,000 out and use that as his down payment to buy into a business. So that's one of the strengths of real estate investing, is that you can hang on to it and keep the benefits of the property while you own it, but you can let the property fund your other aspirations down the line. Another client of mine, Brian, helped him purchase 2 properties back in 2006. So these were 2 duplexes. When he bought those, he paid approximately $122,000 for each one. As you can see, prices were quite a bit lower then, but that just goes to show you that prices increase over time. So he bought them for one was $122,000, one was a couple thousand more. So we'll just say $125,000 to split the difference. The initial rents were $600 per side. So again, he was bringing in $1,200 a month on a $120,000 purchase, which was great. He was getting positive cash flow. Now, fast forward to 2019, when he sold them last year, he was getting $950 a side. So he started out with $600 a side. Fast forward, he was at 950 a side, and he was about to increase the rents again. He had a Section 8 tenant, had some market tenants. So it was a mix between the tenants, but the rents now are, well, then when he sold them were worth over 1,000 a side, and he was about to do another increase. But just that 600 to 950 increase was an additional $700 a month per duplex, which is over $8,000 a year per 2-unit building. So $16,000 a year increase in rents over this time frame that he gave himself total, plus the principal pay down, plus the initial cash flow he was getting when he first bought the properties, plus, plus, plus. So, all those benefits we walked through 2 weeks ago, he was getting quite a bit, but he has some online businesses. He said, you know what? I want to go ahead and sell these properties and funnel that into these businesses, and sort of get into another industry and just focus on this industry. And he did that. So after all of his selling expenses, he was able to pull out $65,000 at the sale for each of the properties. And he was able to funnel that into his other businesses, which are doing quite well. So that's another example of using real estate and hanging on to it and having a good team and getting people and processes in place so that you can let that property grow for you. And then, before you know it, you wake up one day and you have a ton of value sitting in a property in addition to all the other benefits that you have from that property. And you can use that equity growth and that principal pay down to fuel your other passions in life. And that's what both of these clients were able to do. So that's all the more reason for you to consider owning income property. But I want to be clear that to be successful in investing, letting folks into the room. To be successful in investing, you have to build a strong team. You can't do everything yourself. You will never know all the answers. If you wait until you feel like you know all the answers, you're never going to invest and you're never going to get all those benefits that I was walking through last week. So, all of us have that sort of feeling within us that we need to sort of know what we don't know. And you do to a point, but you need to build a strong team and have people around you who know more than you do in their area of expertise so that they can lift you up and help you to reach your goals, whatever they are in real estate. So there's no way for you to effectively be able to do it all yourself. You're going to have to trust other folks and get to know sort of what their strengths are. And that can take time, but start building your team. You're going to need attorneys, inspectors, repairmen, property managers, potentially a realtor, lenders, etc. So I would like to introduce you to someone who's on my team. One of my favorite property managers here in the Triangle. She's great. I was trying to remember how long we've been working together, and I couldn't even remember because it's been so long. So if you remember Germany, feel free to.
10, 11 years now?
Yeah, it's been over 10 years. It's been a long time. But Germany is a very trusted person on my team here in the Triangle. I call Germany. I've had clients who've said, Tiffany, can you build some multifamily for me? We don't like what we're seeing in the existing market, and we kind of want new construction because we don't want maintenance headaches. I'll call Germany. Hey, what types of rentals are in demand? How many bedrooms? What are the stronger areas? As a property manager, that's her wheelhouse, and that's what she looks at every day. She's dealing with tenants every day. She's dealing with property owners every day, and she knows the ins and outs of the rental market. So a strong property manager is definitely a strength for your team. So welcome, Germany, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to sort of handle today as sort of an interview with you, Germany.
Okay.
If you don't mind, if you could maybe start by telling everyone a little bit about yourself, your company, what you do, what your focus areas are, and we can dive in.
Okay. My name is Germany McNeil. I've been in property management for a little over 19 years now. And I have a passion for it. I started my own company called Derm. And I started it about 2 years ago. So I'm a little over 2 years old. And I'm excited about being here and talking to you all tonight about investment properties.
Awesome. And how can they reach you? Can we maybe put it in the message group?
I can put it in the chat.
Okay.
Contact information. I'll put my phone number and also my email address so that everyone will have it. And if y'all ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Even if I'm not managing a property for you, I'm very willing to answer any questions that you may have about your investment property. Or if you're thinking about purchasing a property, I do a free rent evaluation for you.
Do you work in North Raleigh? We have a question already from Flo.
Yes, I do. I work in North Raleigh. I do Wake County, Durham County, Alamance, Orange, and up to Guilford County.
Awesome. So can you explain to us, what does a property manager do?
Okay, so a property manager pretty much comes in and takes over and does all the legwork for you, and they leave you to be the decision maker. So once I take over a property, I will take marketing pictures. I'll give my suggestions on any repairs that need to be done to get the home ready for a tenant. I'll market the property, facilitate showings, process any applications, negotiate the lease on your behalf. Once the tenant has signed the lease and moved in, we handle everything with the tenant, from collecting the money, any work orders that come in, any concerns that come. And we go out periodically to do inspections so that we make sure that we're protecting your asset while the tenant is living in the home.
Awesome. And 1 second. There were some questions that I posted, and maybe we can run through some of those. What do you think is helpful or important for everyone on this call to know for being an effective landlord or rental property owner? Are there some things that you would point out are most important?
I think you touched on one of them already, is that you have to build a strong team. There's no way for you to know everything that goes on with property management. So it's important that you have a strong team, from your property manager to vendors that are working on your house, that are knowledgeable of your house, and to make sure that it's a team that you can actually trust, because sometimes you have a property that is in another county or in another state, and so you're dependent on your team to be your eyes and your ears and the person that can actually physically go to the property when you're not able to.
Awesome. Jamal.
How many properties do you have?
We're going to skip that one. So Carla Dorsey would like to know, how can someone get into property management?
Okay, so to do property management on your own, it does require a real estate license. If you're working under someone, you can do property management, but you're limited to things that you can do without a license if you don't have a real estate license. But getting the license qualifies you to do residential, commercial real estate, but it also qualifies you to do property management in North Carolina.
Awesome. And let's see, we'll go back and forth from this list.
Okay.
And to this one. Germany, are you doing in-home assessments at this time or just virtual? Tatiana.
On vacant properties, I am doing in-home assessments. If they are occupied, we're trying to do video or virtual just because of everything going on with COVID. We have suspended in-house inspections also for my properties, but a lot of my tenants, when it's time for their inspection, we've been doing video chats, letting them walk me around the house just to make sure they're taking care of the house, showing me the filter, making sure they're changing out the air filter, because a little preventive maintenance can go a long way when it comes to taking care of your rental property.
Awesome. And Jamal would also like to know, what are the fees that a property manager keeps out of the rent that's gathered, and what do the fees get for the property owner? What services?
Okay, so every property manager is different. My fees, I charge an initial fee of $300, and that covers that initial work that I do with getting the tenant into the home. And then once the tenant is in the home, I charge 8% of the rent as my management fee each month.
So how does that work out? So let's say a toilet gets G.I. Joe stuck in the drain,
Okay.
what happens when the tenant calls you and needs that fixed?
Okay, so when a tenant calls me, I'm going to ask a bunch of questions just to make sure whether I need to send a handyman or a plumber. There are some items that a handyman can go out and take care of, and it's not going to cost nearly as much as what a plumber would charge to come out. But if I do need to send the plumber and they pull GI Joe out, my vendors know that if it's something that the tenant is responsible for, they're going to let me know so that I can charge it back to the tenant. If a tenant has only one toilet, it's considered an emergency if the toilet gets stopped up. So if they've got more than one toilet, it can wait, but if it's only one toilet and it's Saturday or a holiday, you do have to send somebody out immediately because it is considered an emergency.
Okay. So for everyone on the call, keep in mind that that means there is a property management fee, and that property management fee that Germany and all other property managers charge covers them handling your bookkeeping. They collect the rents, they get you your portion of the rents after they're collected. If the tenant is late, they are the ones following up with the tenant to get that rent collected. When it comes to the end of the year and you need your forms for income and expenses so that you can go to your CPA to file your taxes, Germany provides that to you. Germany, you also do electronic deposits for rents, correct?
Yep, I do. For my owners, they have an online portal where they're able to log in and see the rent that's been collected, the money that's been sent out to them. They're able to see any invoices that we've paid on their behalf. And they're able to send money if I don't have enough money to cover a particular invoice. We do also hold an owner reserve. My owner reserve for most of my owners is $300, so that if a work order comes in during the month after I've already released the rent to you, I've got some coverage if I need to send somebody out and pay an invoice before the next month's rent comes in.
Awesome. And Tony Stephenson wants to know, do you manage Section 8 properties as well?
I do. I do manage Section 8 properties, and that was one of the questions that Tiff and I had discussed earlier, because there is a stigma behind accepting Section 8 for your property, but there is some truth behind the stigma. They say if you accept Section 8, they're going to tear your property up. And I wouldn't say to that extent, because there are people that have the voucher that won't tear your property up. But also keep in mind that for somebody to have a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom voucher, they have to have a certain amount of people in their home. So they've got to have at least 5 or more people in their home to even have a 3-bedroom voucher. So where if you were renting to someone that didn't have a voucher and it's a household of 3 versus renting to someone that has Section 8 and it's a household of 6, you're just going to have more wear and tear on your home.
Yeah.
One of the pros is that the money is guaranteed. It comes like clockwork on the first of every month. At least the Section 8 portion does, because a lot of times tenants will have their own portion that they're also responsible for. But Section 8, they have a whole system for making sure that the tenant stays in compliance. And one of the issues that I find with people that have had a bad experience with Section 8 is that they didn't utilize the system that Section 8 has in place. If you're having an issue, if you feel like they're doing something wrong to the house or neglecting or misusing the house, you can call into Section 8 and they'll send an inspector out to come and check the place out. And if they are in violation, they have policies in place that if they don't correct it, they'll kick them off the program. So you have to utilize the processes that they have in place. It does take a little bit of work. And, that's why it's good to have a property manager, because we're going to do all that work for you. We're going to send out the emails. We're going to make sure that the inspector has access. We're going to get all the notices and make sure that anything that needs to be taken care of is taken care of in a timely manner.
So all of that to say, and thank you for sharing that, don't let the stigma or the hearsay about Section 8 keep you from pursuing Section 8 tenants, because again, they do have a voucher that's providing them free or almost free rent. They do not want to lose that voucher. That's covering their housing. So there is an incentive in place for them to sort of follow the rules and do certain things. And also keep in mind, there are market tenants that are not Section 8 that can tear up your place too.
That's
And
right.
there are some, call them career, what's a good way to call them? Like folks who sort of know how to work the system.
Yeah.
And, you know, they know the landlord tenant law as well as the attorneys do, so that they can try to work the system. I mean, there are market tenants out there that can do that as well. So your tenant screening is important. That's something that Germany and property managers cover, just to help with, and you need to do tenant screening, whether it's Section 8 or market tenant.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that you have the right person, you know, in the right situation in place.
And even with tenant screening, you know, we do a credit check, criminal check, we verify rental history, we verify income. That does not guarantee that you're not going to get somebody in there that could tear your house up.
Yeah.
I've had tenants that moved in, they were perfect on paper, and they could get in the house and have a mental breakdown. Something could happen in their life that, you know, they just get into a funk and they don't want to do anything anymore. So that's why we go and we do the periodic inspections. If we start to see red flags, or we start seeing that they're paying late where they normally weren't paying late, we're reaching out to them, because we try to build a rapport with the tenant so that if something does happen, they can come to us and they know that we're going to work with them to fix the situation.
So Peter has a follow-up question. In general, are property management companies open to finding Section 8 tenants and assisting with the additional coordination involved? And you kind of answered that, but just in case there was anything else you wanted to add.
And we take Section 8 tenants through the same process with the credit check, criminal check, rental history, verifying income. They can't have a criminal record after a certain amount of time in order to even be on the program. The only difference between somebody that has Section 8 and someone that doesn't is that the income isn't considered the same as somebody that doesn't have the voucher, because Section 8 is taking up the slack and they're covering the rent. Now, Section 8 does have a cap off on what they'll pay according to bedroom size. So you have to be mindful of that, because even if they come to your property and they decide to rent it, they've done the application process, they have a packet that has to be filled out. It's called a RTA, which is a resident tenancy approval packet. And once you fill out that packet for them and it goes to their worker, they do what's called a rent reasonableness test. And so they will take into consideration what type of utilities are in the home, and they try to calculate what expenses the client will have while living in the home. And then they'll let you know the maximum rent that you can rent that home to that client for. Right now, a 3-bedroom is around 1,100 for Section 8, but a 4-bedroom is around 1,400. But if they are porting in from another state, Section 8, you actually can use your voucher from another state and go to a different state, and they will use your guidelines for the state that you came from. So you can get somebody that has a cap off that's higher than what the housing authority is in this region.
Awesome. I learned something new. I didn't know that part. So Brian wants to know, did you say you have to have a broker's license to be a property manager? And is your reserve held in a trust account?
Yes, you do have to have a trust account to hold your deposits, and any money that you're holding on behalf of your owner, any money that you're holding on behalf of a third party, you have to put it into that trust account and reconcile it every month.
And you have to have a license?
Yes, you do have to have a license unless you're managing your own property. But if you're doing something on behalf of someone else, then you have to have a license, unless you're working for somebody that is licensed. And if you're working for somebody that is licensed, there are certain things that you are not allowed to do, because you can't negotiate a lease, because you have to have a license to be able to negotiate the terms of a lease. And there are several other items that you need a license for. So you could do it, but you would be limited in what you could do unless it's your own property.
Awesome. So Carla asks, are there tax breaks for having a property manager aside from itemized expenses? So I'll tackle the beginning of that because, of course, disclaimer, always talk to whoever handles your taxes, see your trusted tax advisor. But just like Germany and a Germany's property management fee would be tax, a tax write-off for you. That's an expense of your owning the property. are there any others, any of the repairs, et cetera, you would have a list of those per the paperwork she provides you so that you could itemize. But are there any others that you've seen of Benefit Germany? Any other?
Oh, we do send out the 1099, so it's got all your income and everything already together for you. So when you get ready to file your taxes, all you have to do is take that 1099 and your income expenses report and give that to them. And that's usually all they need to be able to fill out those worksheets for you.
So Jamal asked, Germany, do you have an escrow account to keep pre-lease deposits? Please explain North Carolina law around deposits.
Yes, I have an escrow account. So we collect the deposit before they actually move into the home, and we do have to keep them in that trust account.
Awesome. And Delethea says, Germany, you are hired. I told y'all Germany is a wealth of knowledge. She's amazing. So yeah, definitely reach out to her for all your property management needs. But we'll get back to the prior list. So Germany, how do you determine rental rates? Like how would you explain to someone the process for determining the rental rates for a property?
Okay, so there are several factors that go into determining a rental rate. I do pull the comps to see what is renting in the area, how long it took for it to rent. But not only is the rent determined by the market, location, what type of financing that you're doing, how much you can actually afford to rent it for, the timing, what time of the year that you're coming on the market. In this area, from late March to late July is prime time for the rental market here. Our rental market is driven by the university and the hospital. And a lot of people are associated with the school system for various different reasons, whether they're coming here for a residency or fellowship, or they've got children that are in school. Most people are trying to start looking when school's about to get out, and they want to be settled in before school comes back in. So the timing makes a big difference on how much you can charge for the rent. Also, the condition of the home. That makes a huge difference. If you're trying to overcharge and you haven't kept the best care of the home, I mean, you're setting yourself up to basically have to nickel and dime yourself as you start having a tenant in there, because if they're not pleased from the beginning and they feel like they've overpaid, then they're constantly calling to feel like they're getting the bang for their buck. They're like, well, I'm paying this rent, so I want you to change the color of the siding, and I want you to put new windows in. And they have all sorts of requests that come in. So you want to make sure that you're realistic about the condition of the home when you're actually pricing the home.
Awesome. So Maya asks, when you look at rental comps, are you just using Zillow or other tools?
I do look at Zillow because Zillow pulls rentals from everywhere on the internet. So they do compile information, but Zillow is not 100%. You can't rely on Zillow 100% just because there are certain factors that Zillow doesn't take into consideration, such as timing. Because if you go on Zillow in January and you go on Zillow in July, it's going to show the same amount for that property.
And that's a follow-up question. Does price vary based on peak times of the year?
It does. I mean, during the peak season, you've just got more people that are looking. So it gives you more leverage to ask for the premium rate than in the slow months. If you're overpriced, it's just going to take longer to rent the home out. And one other thing I want to say, and I run into often, anytime I contract with an owner, I have to do what the owner lawfully asks me to do. I can give my recommendation and my suggestions, but oftentimes my owners are trying to get the most that they can in rent. And sometimes you can price yourself out of getting a good tenant. Yeah. Because people that are responsible, usually they're looking for their new home 60 days out because they are planners. And usually they're looking for something affordable. So if you price yourself out of that market, you're missing out on good tenants. And even though you may get more rent, you may get somebody in there that really is not taking care of the home. So you have to be able to find that balance You usually don't want to be the highest priced home on the market in your neighborhood, because if there's competition, people will go to another property. Even if you lived in the home and it was so wonderful to you, if your 3 bedroom is 1550 and the one down the street is 1495, people are going to go for the one that's down the street. So you want to keep those things in mind when you're pricing your home.
Awesome. Flo is asking, as a landlord, should we be concerned with eviction capability during COVID, which may return in high gear in the fall?
Okay, so one of the misconceptions was that you couldn't file for eviction, which is not true. Even during COVID, you could file for evictions. They just deferred the hearings for evictions until after June 1st. I've actually had to go down and file court papers, and I got a court date for July 7th, so it wasn't that far out. But anyone that had trouble due to COVID, I've tried to work with them as much as possible. There are many resources that have stepped up to help people to pay their rent during this pandemic. And, that's one of the things that as a property manager, you may not have time to do, but that's our job, to put together resources and try to help the tenant. Because I've been in this for years, and I've seen where owners and tenants are going head to head. And it's always easier if you can solve a problem where it's amicable for all parties. If they're having some trouble paying, it's a lot easier to work with them and get them to pay than to go through the eviction process, pay for the eviction. You got rent owed. Now you got to wait until they're out before you can get somebody new in. And people let emotions get in the way instead of being sensible about it.
And before you can get someone else in, you probably have to pay to clean, do touch-up paint, do a ton of other work. So you're out of pocket anyway.
We always want to, if the tenant's taking care of the home and they've run into some trouble, we want to try to keep them in the house. Because if they move, then yeah, you got to be prepared to do whatever repairs need to be done to get a new tenant. One place that I see investors fail at is that they start getting this cash flow and they think it's income. And you've got to put money aside for maintenance. If you know that that roof is 15 years old, then you know you need to start putting money aside, because in the next 5 to 10 years, you're probably going to have to purchase a roof. And one of the things that you don't want to do is have a headache every time you get a repair request. You want to start putting that money aside so that you have it set aside, and wait till the end of the year and then pay yourself if it's possible, if you're able to.
Yeah, makes sense. So Sheila wants to know, are there certain improvements that you can make in a home that renters seem to appreciate more and value paying more for?
A fenced yard, that's one of the biggest things. We just live in a society where everybody has pets. A lot of people have pets. And a lot of owners say, I don't want pets. I don't want any pets. And you don't have to have pets. You just kind of cut yourself out from a lot of the rental pool market, because a lot of people have pets these days. So a fenced yard is definitely an improvement that you can do, that you can get more rent on the house from. Depending on the area that you're in, right now, downtown Durham is a hot area. So I've been encouraging my owners that have properties around downtown Durham to update the kitchen, update the bathroom, because I know that we can get a lot more rent if those items are updated.
So back to the pet conversation, just to take some time on that. I want to make sure everyone understands that when you own a property as an income property, you're going to have an insurance policy on it. So talk to your insurance agent, because there are a lot of different types of coverage you can have. You will have, if you have a mortgage, the traditional policy that is on that property. You also might want to have an umbrella liability policy to cover you liability wise if you're holding more than one property. And there are some other options. I had a client who had a vacancy for more than 30 days and then found out that her insurance policy did not cover her for vandalism if the property was vacant for more than 30 days, and the property was vandalized after the 30-day mark. I don't know how they knew that it was more than 30 days, but they have their methods. So you might want to get an extended vacancy rider. just make sure to have a good talk with your insurance agent. But one thing that you'll need to talk to your agent about as well is breeds of dogs, because certain breeds of dogs may negate your insurance coverage, because there are certain breeds of animal that are considered vicious. Like, I was surprised to find out that German Shepherds are on the vicious dogs list and can negate a potential landlord policy with some insurers, like Dobermans, pit bulls, things like that. So if you're going to allow pets, just have a conversation with your insurance agent to make sure that you're not bringing a tenant in that might negate some of the liability coverage that you have to protect yourself on your property. But have you come across that, Germany?
Yeah, with the landlord policy, it's a little bit different than your regular homeowner's insurance policy, just because you're not actually living in the home. So you want coverage for the tenant. And if they're bringing people into the home, there are some things that you can be held liable for. Um, and when it comes to pets, I encourage my owners to make pets negotiable. All pets are not equal, but every tenant calls me and they say, "Oh, my pet is wonderful. He never has accidents." They never call me and tell me that the pet is horrible and chews up the walls. And
And
but
big neighbor, or yes.
they never call and tell me that. They send me pictures and everything. But to have a pet in the home with my company, we have a standard increase in the rent of 3% if they want to have a pet in the home, and then we make them pay a half-month pet deposit. That's refundable as long as there are no damages in the home. When we're pulling the rental history, we'll ask the previous landlord, was that pet in the home and did they have any issues with the pet? And also I ask for vet and grooming records, because just over the years, I found that people that actually take care of their pet are more likely to not have the pet tearing up your home. When considering a pet, I never suggest a brand new pet, a puppy, a new cat, just because they are not potty trained, they have accidents. Um, breed is, you know, there are some aggressive breeds, but if you've got somebody that's had a German Shepherd for 10 years, he's probably just laying around. He's probably not going to chew on anything. So those are some of the things that we take into consideration when we're considering the pet. And just making sure that you've got enough in the deposit to make you feel comfortable about having that pet in your home. Some of my owners choose to do a non-refundable pet deposit so that they can use that money to do a treatment to the carpet when the tenant moves out. Some of my owners require that the tenant have it professionally cleaned, deodorized, and do a flea treatment when they're moving out of the home in order to get the home ready for the next tenant. So if you have heard a horror story or you're feeling finicky about having a pet in your home, there are provisions that you can make to help you feel more comfortable and ease any anxiety that you may have about having a pet in the home.
Nice. Brian is asking, would you say COVID has affected the number of days rentals are on the market?
Um, Not really, just because people still need to move even though we're in a pandemic. Um, Probably not as much in this area because it's just driven by the university and the hospital.
Yeah.
And because we're dealing with COVID, they're having to ramp up stuff in their area. So we're getting an influx of people that are needing to move because they're starting these programs, they're starting new jobs in this area. Um, we've constantly been building up, so people still need to move. Now, the challenge that we had was trying to show an occupied property before a tenant actually moves out so that we can get the next tenant lined up. But we were able to successfully modify our showing process, because even now that we can show occupied properties, a lot of my tenants don't feel comfortable with strangers coming into their home because of the pandemic. So we've been working with them to do video chats with prospects. We've had them do actual tours of the house and showing the house and what they loved about the house. And so we've been able to successful in working with them so that we can get the next tenants lined up.
Nice. So is there a certain size for this area? Is there a certain size rental unit that you suggest as a first time investment?
I'm getting a lot of 1 and 2 bedroom requests. Um, right now, baby boomers are making up a lot of the market because they're getting at an age where they cannot maintain the home anymore. They've owned for years. They don't want the responsibility. They want it to be somebody else's responsibility. And so they're looking to downsize, and all they want to do is pick up the phone and put in a work order. They don't want to have to get out there and do stuff to the yard and maintain the house. So I've been getting a lot of 1 and 2 bedroom inquiries.
So are those same baby boomers looking more for one unit, I mean, one level living, or are they okay with
Yeah,
stairs?
most of them are looking for one level living or master down. Those are, they go so quick. If I have a ranch, it just goes quick. I get a lot of people that are looking and they go very, very quickly. So if you're looking to invest, I mean, it's just a good investment to have a ranch or a master down, because that market is, the baby boomers, they have money, they're reliable, they don't really want to bother you unless something is wrong, and they usually have owned a home before, so they know what it takes to take care of a home.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to someone who's trying to decide, should they self-manage their property if they're looking at maybe picking up a first investment property and they don't know if they should try to self-manage versus having a property manager? What advice could you offer?
If you have the time, if you have the time, because there's nothing hard that we do, it's more tedious than anything else. Um, Usually the air conditioner breaks down on the 4th of July while you're out of town and nobody's open. And then you're trying to enjoy your vacation and you're like, I hate having this investment property. So, if you have the time, if you have the patience, um, those are the biggest things, having the time and the patience to, and also, I mean, we do a lot of problem solving. When a tenant calls and says, I've got a water stain on my ceiling, my first thought is there a roof leak? Is the water heater in the attic? Is the air conditioner in the attic? Can my tenant get up in the attic to see where it's coming from? Because if I send out the wrong vendor, it's a trip charge. If I think it's the HVAC and it's actually a roof leak, my owner's going to have to pay a trip charge. So um, just being very inquisitive if it's your first time, and asking as many questions as possible so that you can make the best decision at that time. A lot of times with property managers, you really don't appreciate them until something happens. Once something happens, that's when you really see that expertise come into play. I had a tenant right before COVID that burned her kitchen down. She was going to fry some chicken and fell asleep, and the smoke detector woke her up and burnt the whole kitchen down. And it was like my owner's like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And I'm like, just calm down, call your insurance company. I'm going to work with her. And we ended up having to move her out of the unit so that we could remediate all of the smoke damage that was in the house. But there are a lot of working parts when something catastrophic happens in the house.
Wow. So you've, I'm sure, dealt with hundreds of owners over the last 19 years in property management. So can you tell all of us sort of how to build a win-win relationship with you as a property manager? What are the things that an owner, whether it be a seasoned owner or a new owner, do, and what are the things that can cause problems between
Okay.
the relationship with the property manager?
My number one thing is, remember that you hired them as a professional for a reason. Um, if they're giving you advice, even if you want to do what you want to do, take their advice into consideration. Um, I see so many times where I give advice and they're like, well, no, I want to do it this way. And it works that way for a while. But then later on down the road, it's like, I should have listened to you because this went this way. So just having that line of communication open so that when stuff occurs, when issues come up, you just have to be open-minded and willing to listen and work together to make decisions on your property. Because our ultimate goal is to protect your asset and to make sure that your asset is not depreciating while a tenant is in place.
Yeah, definitely. So can you explain what fair housing law is, and what folks need to understand? And so fair housing, guys, is one of the reasons why I feel like for new property owners, new income property owners, it is really helpful to have a property manager on your side so that you can sort of learn to navigate this topic, because this is one of the topics that you can even very innocently get in trouble for. So maybe Germany, if you can explain what fair housing law is and how you navigate that.
So fair housing laws are laws that protect the public. It keeps you from discriminating against potential tenants based on familial status, race, ethnicity, color, several different items. And when we're getting applications for your home, if there are multiple applications, we're going to send you enough information not to violate fair housing. Now, there is a fine line when it comes to some items, such as occupancy versus familial status. We send you information about the applicants, but oftentimes my owners are like, well, how many people will be living in the home? And it's like, well, I can tell you how many people are living in the home, but if you have an occupancy standard that you're going to hold to every applicant, that's fine as long as you're doing that for every applicant. But if you like, oh, they got 3 kids, I'm not renting to them. Familial status covers that. So you could very easily violate fair housing unknowingly. So that's why we try to give you as much information as possible without violating fair housing, because even though you may be privileged to that information, there are some items that you cannot base your decision off of.
So, and I actually last week saw an advertisement. I can't remember where it was. I can't stand it when I can't remember things, but it said something along the lines of, hey, this is a great house. It's right down the street from XYZ church and would be great for a Christian family. You know, that's a fair housing violation in advertising. You know,
And if
something. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and if you're advertising for your own property, you don't have the same obligations as a realtor would have that's doing it on your behalf. Um, and also, if it's there are some stipulations where if a property belongs to a church, there are some stipulations that they don't have to meet when they're advertising their property. But for everyone else, yeah, you cannot try to advertise to try to get a Christian family because you feel like Christians will take better care of your home.
Or a married couple, or a, you know, familial status. You can't, you know, there are a lot of quote unquote protected classes that you need to be aware of. So that's another place where having a good property manager who can navigate that for you comes into play.
And there are some classes that aren't protected, such as undergrads. You don't have to rent to them. They
Mhm.
might tear your house up. They might have
Mhm.
your house up. So, Erica, she's like, yes. So and that's not protected. And pets, if you don't want to rent to them because they've got too many pets, pets can tear up a home. I had a lady that had a bird. I'm like, what can a bird do? It's in the cage. Well, I didn't know she lets the bird out and he pooped all on the crown molding.
Oh no.
And it was high ceiling, so I had to pay somebody to come in, and you know, I had to take part of her pet deposit. So yeah, you just have I got stories for days.
Awesome. Let me see. I'm trying to make sure. Let's see. There's certain improvements. If a tenant, so Tracy asks, if a tenant is on Section 8 and has not paid their portion of rent and is given notice to leave, can you have an inspection done prior to them leaving?
Yeah, you can call Section 8 because see, if they're trying to leave your house, there's a form that you have to fill out called a letter of good standing. If you haven't filled that out and they're moving, 9 times out of 10, they may have filled it out themselves and sent it back over there. But there's a letter of good standing that you have to fill out saying that they're not behind in rent and that the house has been taken care of. If they owe you rent, Section 8 will not allow them to get a new property. So call your worker. Call your worker if they're behind. Even if they've given notice, call your worker, because what you don't want to do is they move out and then, I mean, you have the security deposit, but if there's more or if there are damages and they're gone, it just makes it that much harder to try to recover that money. But you still can. If they move to another property and they still owe you and you notify Section 8, it will affect them at the new property and they'll make them pay it in order for them to be able to keep their voucher.
So Erica asks, with maintenance, do you get the homeowner's approval before making any repairs?
Kind of, sort of. So whenever I get a work order, I go ahead and I assign the vendor, and I also send the work order out to the owner. So you do have a small window of time to say, hold up, I don't want to do it, or I have knowledge of it, or we've got a warranty on it, or we have a certain vendor that we want to send out. So we do notify you before the vendor actually goes out to the home. If we don't hear back from you, then we'll go ahead and take care of it, and we'll send you a copy of the invoice once it comes in. My owners give me that authority to do any repairs that are $300 or under. But I do keep them in the loop. But I just recently had a microwave that went out. It needed to be replaced. I've been calling my owner, emailing. He hasn't responded. The last message I left was, I'm going to go ahead and replace the microwave. Please call me when you get this message, because sometimes I do have to go ahead and make that decision. But I try to make the decision that I feel like my owner would make. Most of my owners I've been working with for years, and once I've worked with them and I get to know them and I know how they like to handle stuff, a lot of times I'll go ahead and handle it. And when they call, I'm like, I did this, and she like, well, that's how I would have done it. So we try to build that rapport so that we can, make effective decisions in a timely manner.
And do you recommend that owners get a home warranty or just work through repairs with you and your team?
I'm 50-50 about the home warranty. Home warranties are good because you just pay your deductible and they come out and they do the repair. But you want to be knowledgeable of your home warranty. There are some things that a home warranty doesn't cover. For example, I had an owner, the AC went out, they called the home warranty. The warranty covered the repair, but it didn't cover the Freon. Well,
That's the most expensive part.
It was like $60 a pound because it was the older unit. So it was like, yeah, you did save some on the repair, but you still had to come out of pocket. So home warranties can be good. But you also could take that same money and put it into an account, and when the repair come up, just pay for it out of pocket. So I think that's a personal decision you have to make based on the property. But if it is an older property, if the appliances are older, you feel like you're going to be having a lot of repairs, it can be good to have the home warranty, because a lot of home warranties have, if they can't repair it, they'll replace it for you, or they'll give you a prorated amount to go towards replacing that appliance. But if you're going to get one, research it, know the policy, and pay for something that's worth having, because most people don't read it, they get it, and then when something goes wrong, now they want to read it. That's not
They
the time.
find out something's not covered. Yeah. Awesome. So, okay, good question. Do you require that tenants have tenants insurance, rental insurance?
I require that they have renters insurance, and I require that they list us as additional insured, so that if something happens and there's a conflict, I can call that renters insurance and file a claim if I need to. Renters insurance can cover stuff like if the refrigerator goes out and they lose food, renters insurance covers that. If they are displaced because of a fire or water damage, renters insurance will cover them going to a hotel. But in getting renters insurance, and I instruct my tenants, find out about the policy. With the lady that had the fire, she had renters insurance, but her policy said that she had to spend her money up front and they would reimburse her. So that really wasn't helpful to her in the middle of COVID, you know? So you want to make sure that if you are requiring it, I usually give suggestions to them for policies that I know are good policies.
So what impact do you think schools going to online learning in the fall could have on the market with less students and employees needing to be near campus?
Well, in the fall, from what I've heard and the meetings that I've been to, I don't think most institutions are going to stick to strictly online. What I've been hearing is that it's going to be a mix of in-class and online with alternate days so that there are not as many people in the actual classroom at the same time. There are some things that can't be done online. If you're taking a class and you've got to do a lab, that's something that can't be done online. You've got to physically go and be at the lab. So I don't think that that will have a great bearing on the rental market at this time, because we're kind of, all of this is new to us. This is the first time we've been through this type of pandemic, but I don't think it's going to affect the market. And housing is essential. People will always need housing. People will always need shelter. It's a basic need. So you will always have that rental market, just because not everybody is able to buy and not everybody wants to buy. Some people that can afford to buy don't want to buy because they don't want the responsibility of having the maintenance. And especially with the baby boomers. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I'm getting a lot of people that are older that they just want to rent. They do not want the responsibility.
So do you manage any short-term rentals like Airbnb or VRBO or any of the?
I don't. Just because it's time consuming. Airbnb is short term, so you're having to constantly clean the unit, turn the unit over, look for repairs, find new people to rent it out. So I don't manage Airbnb at this time.
And are there any specific things to look for in a good property manager in order to weed out the bad ones?
Find somebody that you get along with, somebody that you can talk to. I mean, it's so important. I mean, I know it's business, but you really want somebody that you can call and actually have a conversation with and that you can reach. That's the biggest complaint that I get when I take on a property from another property manager, is that I wasn't able to reach them. When I did reach them, they, didn't know what was going on with the property. One thing that I've set up my company a little bit different from some of the other property management companies, that I'm the point of contact. I have a staff that works behind me, but I'm the point of contact. My staff keeps me informed. So if you call, it's a click of a button for me to pull up all the information on your property and be able to proficiently talk with you about what is going on with the property.
And if I can just do a little Germany commercial here, I promise she's not paying me for this, but I just want to say, y'all know I've been in real estate here since 2003. I've worked with a lot of property managers. The thing that I really appreciate about you, Germany, is that you're so responsive. Because one of the biggest complaints, it's important for me when I'm working with a client who is looking at getting into owning rental property and I hand them over to someone, I don't want them to have to call me back because they're displeased with service. And in the past, that has been a large complaint in years past before I found Germany. Because some property managers just aren't, they're managing a lot of properties, but they do have someone else who responds and they're not necessarily responsive. And when you are, paying for a service on this asset that you may or may not even be in the same city as, you want to know that someone's got your back and someone will respond to those things that need response. So, I kudos to you for being so responsive, because I always hear that from my clients and saying that they really appreciate your level of responsiveness.
Thank you. And I think a lot of times it comes from it becomes like a parent child, the property manager is like, am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong? And I'm more like, if there's something wrong, let's fix it. Yeah. Let's work together to fix whatever the problem is. I had a property one time where the man, it was a lakefront property. Well, the lake was in the back of the yard, but there was some brush down towards the lake, and it had started growing over the years. And the tenant had a landscaper that was coming, and he was cleaning up the area. He was keeping it neat looking, but it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger over the years. So when the owner came and he wanted to sell the property, he's like, I can't even see the lake. Look at all this brush that grew up. And I'm like, well, it looks neat, but I just didn't realize that it wasn't there before. Even though they were taking care of it, it wasn't supposed to be there. So I'm human. I do make mistakes. I'm not perfect, but we work together to make sure that we got it taken care of. We got it cleared out of there. But that's something that can easily be overlooked because it was kept neat, and it was neat in appearance. And when you went to the property, it wasn't an eyesore. It wasn't something that you went and say, oh my gosh, because it was kept neat in appearance. So we try to work with our owners as much as possible to make sure that we're taking care of their property. We take really good pictures up front so that we can refer back to those pictures when we're going out to actually do inspections.
And I would add on also, you have to determine what's most important for you in order for you to be able to select the right service provider for you. So if you're someone who lives online and likes to do all of your transactional business online, you need to find a property manager who has an online system set up and can interact with you in that way. If you're a person who needs conversation, you need a property manager who's going to be available for that. There are some property managers that still send out checks and don't do electronic payments. You need to be okay with that if you're not dealing with one who handles things that way. So, there's no, one silver bullet, best service provider. It's really going to depend a lot on you, and picking the person that's a good match for yourself. So you always need to interview anyone who you're bringing onto your team, whether that be your inspector, your property manager, your realtor, et cetera, to make sure that they fit with your constitution and what's most important to you.
And you want somebody that is knowledgeable. Um, I don't suggest hiring a family member.
Mm-mm.
And I don't, if you're going to rent to a family member or a friend, use a property manager.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all good when y'all are friends and I just need a place to stay. And then they get in there and tear your house up.
Or don't pay you on
Yeah,
time.
or don't pay you on time. And then they want you to be compassionate because their cat died and everything else. You want a property manager that can take the emotion out and deal with the material facts.
Yeah.
Most of my owners, I deal with tenants all the time. I deal with disgruntled tenants. I deal with happy tenants, mad tenants, and a lot of my owners, they don't even know anything about all the emotion that is involved with the tenant. When I go to them, it's usually, this is what they've requested. This is what we've looked up for you. Here are your options. How do you want me to handle this? And we handle it on our end. So that's one of the benefits of having a property manager. It takes away the headache of having to deal with the tenant directly. Because, things are good when they're good, but when they start to go south, yeah, it can be a headache for somebody that is not in this field.
So back to the pet question. If you are a landlord and you have a very strict no pet rule, Marcus would like to know what happens if one of your applicants has a service or a therapy animal. Can you refuse them?
No, they're protected by ADA. That's different from fair housing. So the American Disabilities Act allows them to have a service animal. They don't have to have papers. And if they say that it's a service animal, the most that you can request is a letter from their doctor saying that they are required. And you cannot inquire about what type of medical condition that they have. So they are allowed to have a service animal, companion pet. They've been trying to pass new legislation on what is considered a service animal or a companion pet, but as of right now, you cannot discriminate against them because of that.
But you can have additional fees or deposits to protect you as the landlord?
No, because you can't treat a service animal as a pet. So you can't charge the fees that you would for a pet because it's not considered a pet.
I
Yep.
see Carlita's way. she, she, she didn't like that answer.
And I've had some over the years that have a pit bull. I'm like, that is not a service animal. Like, what does he do? Like, I've had some, but if they choose to do that, and I can't discriminate against them, I'm going to inspect that house. I'm going to inspect it because if there are damages, regardless of who did it, they're responsible for fixing them. And it's easier to get a tenant to pay for repairs while they're in the home than after they've moved out of the home. So if we see that that pet is causing problems, we can violate them for a breach of lease for damages, not for pet damages, but for damages, period.
Awesome. So are there any recommendations to protect you from smokers?
Well, our lease agreement tells them that they cannot smoke. If they do smoke, they're responsible for any services that you do to get the house back to its original condition, which can include smoke remediation, having the ducts cleaned. That can be used out of their security deposit after move out. If they're smoking while they're in the home, it's usually best to just go ahead and breach the lease and have them move out, because telling them not to smoke and they're a smoker, they're probably gonna smoke in your home. When it gets cold and it's snowing outside, they're gonna smoke in your home. Yeah. So if you do see a problem, it's usually easier to say, this probably isn't a good fit for you. I can file court papers for the breach of lease, or we can work out a time for you to move out and I can find somebody else to move in.
So Carlita's Way mentioned, I work with contractors. How do you best disclose what a renter is liable for upfront without having to approve minor repairs caused by neglect on behalf of the renter's misuse?
Okay, so you want to take care of any repairs at the house, no matter how minor they are, because if you neglect a minor repair, it becomes a larger repair. It's just like with your car. If you don't change your oil, you can end up messing your motor up. If you don't rotate your tires, then it's gonna throw your axle off, your tire rods. Like it's, so you want to fix any minor repairs, but when your contractors go out, you want to review their invoice. You want to send somebody out that's going to put in the invoice what they did, what they found while they were there, so that you can know if it was something that was caused by a tenant. If you have that feeling from the beginning, when that work order comes in, ask your property manager, can you ride by there? Can you go over and take a look at what actually went wrong and try to see, was it from misuse or neglect? Because if there is signs of misuse or neglect, you can hold the tenant responsible.
Let's see, Tracy's asking, what is a good renter's insurance? So keeping in mind that we don't want to necessarily mention companies because service offerings can fluctuate, but maybe what are some of the things to look for in a good renter's insurance policy?
You want to look at how much coverage you need. Do you have a lot of electronics in your house, a lot of computers? That's one of the biggest things, is what type of coverage you need. And then you want to see what the policy is if you have to file a claim. Are they going to pay for you to go to a hotel? Are they going to cover if your food is damaged in the refrigerator? You just want to look for what type of coverage and what happens if something goes. It's similar to car insurance. When you get car insurance, you want to see, if I get in a wreck, are they going to pay for my rental car, or do I have to go get the rental car and then they're going to reimburse me? Like, you want to make sure that you're getting a policy that is going to take care of you in the beginning, so that you're not having to come out of pocket, because oftentimes you're not able to come out of pocket at that time. You also want to consider your deductible. Some people keep a high deductible because they're like, if it's something that costs $250, I'll just take care of it out of pocket. But some people keep the low deductible because they're like, I don't care what it is, I'd rather just pay the deductible and be done with it and not have to deal with it.
So at what point in the process would you recommend pulling in a property manager? Would it be before you buy the property? Would it be after, what's ideal?
For me, it's ideal if I come in when you're considering the property because I can give my recommendations. I can do a rent evaluation. Um, there may be some repairs that need to be done that can be negotiated during your transaction with your realtor that's helping you with the purchase of the property. So I usually like to come in during that time, but I can come in at any time during the process. But it's usually easier for you to work out your numbers and crunch your numbers if you've got your property manager involved ahead of time. Um, a lot of my vendors I have commercial accounts with, so I'm able to get better pricing on some items than just a regular consumer because I handle so many properties. So I'm able to get stuff done at wholesale rather than at retail. So I recommend bringing your property manager in, as soon as possible. As soon as you are thinking about a property, and Tiffany calls me all the time when she's working with a client. She's like, "How much will this house rent for?" And I can do some preliminary stuff, but I don't solidify my recommendation until I've actually seen the property because pictures can be deceiving. People can put lipstick on a pig and you get there and it's really not taken care of. So um, it's best to bring in the property manager ahead of time so that they can, once you close on the property, you can let them take over and they can start doing that legwork for you.
Yeah.
And that way you are just making the decisions.
So I usually call Germany when a client and I have narrowed it down to a property or two that they're thinking of actually moving forward with. I'll call Germany and say, "Hey, I want to double check. How much will this rent for?" I'll let her know what the current leases are. If there are tenants in place, she'll let us know what it'll rent for. And then through the process of closing, Germany will get everything in line with that soon to be owner of the property. She'll get the account set up. She'll get the paperwork done. At closing, remember, if you buy a property that already has tenants in it and you close in the middle of the month and the rent has been collected by that property owner on the beginning of the month, you're going to get prorated rents for the latter half of the month because you're going to be the owner at that time. So Germany can collect the rents and start your account with those rents. If there are already leases in place, she might have the leases rewritten over to her in-house leases. So in North Carolina, when you purchase a property that has a tenant in place, you adopt that tenant and you kind of have to keep them through the duration of their existing lease, but you can update their paperwork to your property manager's current lease. And maybe Germany, you could share a little bit about that, but I would say pull her in before closing because at closing, you can have the keys go straight to Germany so that she can get to work on whatever need. If there's a unit that has to be filled, if there are repairs that have to be done, she can hit the ground running because as of the day of closing, you now have carrying costs every day. If that property is not fully occupied, then you're paying for it. So you want to get that property rented as quickly as possible. But maybe you can share a little bit about that too.
And if you're purchasing a property that's vacant, we're usually able to work it out where I can start marketing the property actually before closing,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you have the seller's permission. And I usually try to do that so that I can get a tenant lined up to get in there as soon as possible after you close so that we can make sure that you're not having to cover that mortgage without having income. If there is a tenant in place, you do have to honor that lease, but it's all about how you phrase it to the new tenant. Um, if you present it to them that we need you to sign off on this new lease, most tenants are going to go ahead and sign off on it. I mean, if they give you some kickback, then you can keep them on the same lease, but you just have to wait until it's time for them to renew. Some of my owners give an incentive. They say, if you sign off on this new lease, then we won't increase your rent for the next term, or some type of incentive to go ahead and get them to sign off on the new lease, because sometimes the old lease has stuff in it that the new owner does not want to adhere to. I've taken over properties where tenants have locked the rent in for years and you can't do a rent increase. And that may not be an ideal situation for you. In that instant, I went to the tenant and said, well, I know you're locked into this rate, but we want to do some updates to the home, but we can't do it if we're not able to increase the rent. So you can continue to stay here at this amount, but we're not going to do any updates at this time. And I've been successful in being able to, do increases because they do want the updates, especially if they've been living there and been having problems with certain items that a owner may just repair but it actually needs to be replaced. I took on a property that my clients bought where the HVAC, it was just old. It needed to be replaced. And they were okay with signing a new lease because they were confident that we were going to come in, we were going to put in a new HVAC system, we were going to update the appliances. And so every tenant is different, but we do what we can to work with them so that we can work for our actual client, which is the owner, in their best interest. Like I said before, we try to keep things amicable where we're keeping a good relationship between the tenant and also with the owner, because it's not always about right versus wrong. Sometimes it's more about protecting your asset. If you've got a tenant that is unhappy, they can do stuff to sabotage your place. They can do stuff to sabotage showings if you're trying to sell the property. So we try to keep it as amicable as possible, but with keeping in mind that the owner of the property is our client, the tenant is actually our customer. They're not our client. So we have to work in the best interest of our owner.
So, Germany, is it legal to refuse a tenant's request to move in a family member who is not on the lease?
No, it's not. And if you don't have to consider it. If you want to consider it, I make them go through the same application process to make sure that we're not moving somebody that wouldn't meet our criteria into the home. If they bring them in the home anyway, our lease, it charges them $500 for bringing an unauthorized occupant in the home or unauthorized pet in the home. So you don't have to let that family member come in, but I speak tenant language. So usually they have to come, it's like, okay, well, this home may not be a good fit for you anymore. Let's find a home that will be a better fit for you because this owner is not going to allow somebody else to move into the home.
How much, let's see, Deletia is asking, how much money would you recommend be kept in reserves?
That's depending on your property. I keep $300 in reserve for my properties just to cover if something comes in during the month. But you should also have your own reserve. And we talked about this at the beginning of the call. Put aside that money for maintenance, because when you're purchasing the property, one of the things that you're going to learn while you're purchasing the property is the age of the roof, the age of the systems in the house, so that you can prepare accordingly. Every appliance has a life expectancy. And you want to make sure that you've put aside enough money so that when it's time for that appliance to go, you're not having to do financing, creating more debt, because that's taking down your cash flow. You want to make sure that you're putting aside enough every month so that when those repairs come up, you've already got that money set aside and it's not a burden on you. Another thing that I always suggest to my owners is once the tenant moves in, pay one more mortgage by yourself. Pay it on your own without the rent money so that when the rent money comes in, it's coming in for the next month. That way, if the tenant has a problem, if something happens, like this pandemic where some people really couldn't pay rent, you're not in a bind looking for that money for that month to cover that mortgage for that month. It gives you some time to figure out something so that you can get that mortgage paid, even if the rent isn't coming in.
Awesome. And actually, hold on. Oh, back to the reserves question. Just to piggyback on what Germany said, it really depends. If you are buying a new construction home that's brand new and everything is under warranty, you don't need to set aside as much in reserves as if you're buying that beautiful, charming 100-year-old fixer that hasn't been updated yet and has knob and tube wiring and a heating and air, the floorboard heating and air, a heating and air system from the 70s. Clearly you're going to want to set more aside for that property. So it's going to vary. There's no single answer for that. It's going to depend on what property it is. what the condition of that property is when you get it, and what you do to that property prior to putting a tenant in place. So, the better the condition of the property, the less you can think of as having reserves, but always put something aside for reserves.
Mm-hmm.
Is it negotiable from the beginning how much a property manager will do, or is it a prepackaged deal?
You got to talk to your property manager, and every property manager is different. I'm hands-on. I've got a staff working for me because I want to be out in the field. I'm riding by my properties. If I'm getting work orders, I'll go by and check the property. That's just the type of property manager that I am. When my client had the fire and there was extensive work that needed to be done, I laid out some options for them. And I'm like, I can send this company that can take care of everything, or you could save a little money and we could piece it together, but I'm going to charge you to manage this project. So those are some of the questions that you want to have when you're interviewing your property manager, because like I said, when something goes wrong, you just want to know that you have somebody that's not going to sit at home like, I ain't riding by there. It's not my problem. They had a fire. Call your insurance agent. I don't know. You want somebody that's actually going to go out and take pictures and send you the pictures and do the stuff that you would do if you were here with the property. That's what you want to look for in your property manager. Somebody that's hands-on, that's going to be out in the field, because a lot of people try to manage stuff from home. They don't want to go out to the property. And some stuff you just can't see from pictures. Some stuff you just can't get from asking the tenant what's going on at the property. Some stuff you have to physically go out to the property and see what's going on.
And Carlita's Way said, and you only charge 8%. So I want y'all to keep that in mind, that there's a lot that goes into that 8%. It's not just the documentation. It's not just, finding tenants to put in your place. It's not just managing repairs. Like, it's a lot for that 8%. But again, that's why a good property manager is a really important part of your team, because they cover a lot of ground for you.
Yeah, and I've got a lot of systems and processes in place just because I've been in the business for so long. So that's how I'm able to do it for 8%. I've been doing it so long that stuff that might take somebody an hour to do, I probably could do in 5 minutes. A lot of times I get maintenance calls, and my assistant, she's calling me. She's like, they called about this. I'm like, okay, call them back, ask these questions. She's like, oh, you were right. They fixed it. Okay, um, simple things like I get calls that the dishwasher isn't working. Well, did you flip the switch? Did somebody hit the switch? I don't want to send a vendor out and it's just a switch, because I got to pay for that vendor to go out. Garage doors, that's a common one. The garage door isn't coming down. I can send you a video that can help them troubleshoot the garage door before I call Wayne Dalton to come out and charge me $200 to do what would have took you 5 minutes. Because most tenants would rather have the problem fixed right then than to have to wait for somebody to come. So if it's something simple that they can fix, I try to, just because I've been in the business long enough, I know how to troubleshoot things. I had a call the other day. The lady said that the air conditioner wasn't working. And we've been getting a lot of AC calls because it's getting really hot right now. So I called, I said, well, what are the symptoms? She said, well, it's working downstairs, but upstairs it's not coming out the vent in my bedroom. To me, I'm like, I don't need to send an HVAC person because the system is working. It sounds like there's some type of obstruction in that duct, and it doesn't take an HVAC person to go and take a look at it. And I sent the maintenance man, and it was simple. The vent cover had broken, and the little metal flap wouldn't stay open. And he fixed it. But I saved my owner a lot of money, because had I sent out an HVAC person, they probably would have charged about $125 to replace that vent. So having that knowledge and knowing how to ask the right questions is one of the reasons that it's good to have a property manager.
So aside from word of mouth and Angie's List and the like, Ayana would like to know, what are some good resources to find property managers?
Word of mouth is the best. Angie's List is good. Online is okay, but most of the time people go online when something goes wrong. Most people aren't sitting around happy and pleased with the service, and I'm going to go online and write a wonderful review. I mean, most people don't do that. Most people, when something goes wrong, that's when they want to go and write a review. So reviews aren't always as reliable. That's why I say word of mouth is usually the best, because you can hear from somebody that you know and about their experience with the person. And not only having that word of mouth, actually interviewing the person that you're planning on working with to make sure that they provide the services that you expect, to make sure that they are knowledgeable of the things that you plan to do with the property. One of my goals with my owners is, if they have a property and I'm managing it for years, I try to give them ideas to help increase the rent at the property, and upgrades that we can do and updates that we can do, and getting them proposals so that when they are ready to move forward, they've got everything that they need to be able to go to that next level. Me and Tiffany have a client in common, Sherman White's, that he bought that property near downtown Durham,
Mhm.
and was getting what, like 600 a side, and now we're up to $1,000 a side, and we've been doing updates, and now we're about to do some real renovations to that property, because downtown Durham has blossomed since he first purchased this property. So now we're going to see him go from getting 600 a month. We're trying to get him up to where he can get 1,500 a month per side.
Yep.
So I try to work with my clients and
Buy income property, y'all.
keep them abreast of how the market is, what's going on in the market, so that we can continue to grow as this marketing continues to appreciate in this area.
And I just want to recap those numbers that she gave for Sherman. He was getting 600 a side years ago. That's 1,200 total in a month for, for the duplex. And they're trying to take it up to 1,500 a side, which is 3,000 a month.
He's at
That's
2,000 now.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
he's gone from 1,200 total to 2,000 total. They're trying to take it to 3,000 total. And this is on a 30-year fixed mortgage. So the mortgage hasn't changed a whole lot. Remember the conversation we had, aside from the taxes and insurance maybe fluctuating a little bit. So that's added cash flow. It comes at the expense of having some updates done to the property. But imagine if his cash flow's grown that much, how much the property value itself has grown that much, it's, over time as well. So, all of that just lends itself to the reasons why it's really important to buy and hold over time, because that time value is what's going to make you win in property ownership. What programs are out there, Germany, for tenants if they're having trouble paying rent right now?
Social services helps to pay rent. There are several churches and nonprofits in the area that helps to pay rent. If you dial 211 in this area, they will give you an abundance of resources. They've compiled everybody that's willing to give help. And there are several, the city and the county have resources listed on their website, whether it's rent, food, whatever type of help that they need. Now, some tenants from COVID are not going to make it. Unfortunately, we've tried to help them. They've tried to get resources. And for those that are not going to make it, I've tried to find them another place that's a little bit more affordable for them. We try to work with them as much as possible, because if we can just get them to agree to move out, it just saves you a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, if they're willing to just go ahead and move out. Because once they realize that they've gotten so far behind that they can't catch back up, it's just usually easy for it to be amicable with them moving out and setting the date so that you can get the home back on the market as soon as possible.
So we're going to take 3 or 4 more questions. I see 2 more in here. So if you have any just pressing curiosities you want to get answered, go ahead and post those, and we'll get to these 2 plus 1 or 2 more. Okay. When you work with new investors, are you okay with them learning from you as you go through the different processes you've set up, just to get a good understanding?
I want to teach you everything that I know.
Because it makes your job easier, I'm guessing.
It does. And I want to teach you what I know, so that when it comes time to make a decision, you can make an informed decision. the knowledge that I have is not a secret. It's not a secret code. Like if you want to manage your property yourself, like I said, you're more than welcome to call me. My job is just to take the pressure and the headache away from you. If anybody here already has investment properties and you've ever had a difficult tenant, or what I like to call a high touch tenant that wants to call you every day, all times of the night, I mean, you can see the advantage of having somebody that can kind of intervene and be in the middle, where you're not having to deal with the emotional part. You're dealing with the material facts, and you're just making decisions about your asset.
Awesome. Do you have a list of recommended property managers in your own personal network around the country?
No, just me. Don't play. No, not around the country. I do have property managers that I work with throughout North Carolina. So if you've got something in a different area, please reach out to me. Let me know what type of property that you have, because I give recommendations based on your specific needs. Because everybody operates different. Everybody has their niche of where they feel comfortable at. So if you do have a rental property in the area that I don't cover, just send it over and I'll send over a recommendation for you.
Awesome. And Carlita wants to say thank you. Thank you for joining us, for sure. And, spread the word. If you know of folks who are curious and who just want to learn a little bit more, that's what this is for. Again, to take the smoke and mirrors out. Y'all, real estate investing isn't rocket science. You just have to understand some basics, build a good team around you, and be willing to take that leap of faith, but it is worth it. If you do it the right way, real estate's not get rich quick, but it's get wealthy over time. So let's see. Great info. Thank y'all. And thank you, Germany. Tracy says she has several things she plans to use from this session. Marcus would like to know, as a property manager, do you get first dibs on landlords selling or unloading properties?
I do. I'm the person that's encouraging them to sell it.
Mm-hmm. We have one right now.
They got lost in the sauce in COVID, and that was the first thing I did. I said, Tiffany, I think that to cut off his losses and stop the bleeding, it's probably best to sell it, because we can re-rent it, but there's no way to make up for that lost rent unless the tenant comes back and pays it. Yeah. And so I do get first dibs on properties that are going onto the market. Oftentimes when they're looking to sell and the lease is not up, I'm usually that first point of contact that they come to when they're planning on selling it. So if you're looking for some properties that aren't quite listed yet,
he calls me first though, y'all. Let's see. Delethea said, have you seen an increase in houses on the market due to COVID and foreclosures? I'll take a stab at that. And so in this market, our market is a little bit different. And we just had a call today with Lawrence Yoon. He is the economist for the National Association of Realtors, because everyone had a ton of questions on, he specifically spoke about the triangle market today, because everyone had a lot of questions on why is our market full steam ahead in the middle of this crisis, in the middle of the economy doing what it's doing. There were a lot of questions, but the triangle market has held itself up quite a bit. And, Germany mentioned earlier that there's still a lot of demand, probably just because we don't have a lot of inventory to cover the amount of people who are moving into this area. With regard to foreclosures, right now, and that's not to say that there won't be a wave later, but right now foreclosures haven't spiked in our area, but that's probably because banks, when they saw all of this stuff, sort of coming to the pass, they put programs in place and processes in place to curb foreclosures. Like they put forbearance programs in place where all you had to do was call in, hit a couple buttons, and they were like, okay, don't make your next 3 months payment. We're going to tack it on to the back. Keep it moving. Don't wait to speak to a human. Goodbye. So they put a lot of the programs like that in place so that people wouldn't have to worry so much. Now, eventually, those programs are probably going to lift, and eventually, unfortunately, some people might not be able to sort of right the ship if their employment situation is still a little bit rocky. But right now, because mortgage lenders, kind of like what Germany was talking about earlier, if you have a tenant who can't pay rent, it makes more sense to try to work with them than it does to boot them out and try to look for another tenant. Same thing with banks. If you have someone who's threatened because of a work loss to get behind on a mortgage, it makes more sense to try to work with them to give them time to right the ship than it does to foreclose, because foreclosures are expensive for banks. So again, they've put programs in place. We don't know how long those programs will be in place. So the question is, are we going to see a lot of foreclosures in the near future? I guess time will tell. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Germany, just from your experience in this market.
I mean, we've got low inventory right now because this is a high area. So if somebody's having trouble paying their mortgage, they need to sell because it'll sell quickly. Even with the rental market, we've got low inventory on single family homes.
Yeah.
So which is, it's helped us because we've got units that are coming available, but there is a need for single family homes in this area right now. I've told Tiffany several times, we've got a huge need for single family homes in Northern Durham because Trayburn Corporate Park they are really blossoming. Corning is now out there. There's other pharmaceutical companies. So um, A&W that makes transmissions for cars, they are steadily increasing their facility. So there's a huge need. And then with Duke Regional, they turned Durham Regional to Duke Regional, and they're bringing in people for residency, fellowship, 10 years. So there's a huge need for single family homes in Northern Durham. And Northern Durham is one of the most affordable parts of Durham right now because everybody's buying in the inner city, everybody's buying out by South Point. So over by 98 and in Northern Durham, it's a little bit more affordable to find a property in those areas. There's still land available in those areas if you're able to build something. But I've got a huge need for 1 and 2 bedrooms. Even if you want to build something, these
I'll build
tiny
it for you.
yeah, the tiny houses, because people used to look for a lot of space, but we're now in a time where people are spending more time outside of the home, so they don't want as much space in the home. They're looking for a smaller space. They want to be close to the amenities, and so I've just been getting a lot of inquiries for 1 and 2 bedrooms.
And back to one point that Germany mentioned is, we don't have a lot of inventory. Just FYI, a healthy market has 3 to 4 months of inventory. So if you were to take, the number of buyers that are in the market, typically there's enough inventory to cover 3 to 4 months worth of buyers at any given time. That's sort of the balance point. Right now, Wake County has about 2 months of inventory. Durham has just over 1.5 months of inventory. So we have pretty much half or less of the amount of inventory that a healthy balance market has. And that's why there's so much demand. And that's why there are so few foreclosures, because anyone on this call who owns a property now has been getting either phone calls or texts or postcards or letters from somebody who would like to buy your home. There are so many people marketing to try to get homes that are not on the market right now that people in the area kind of know, like, oh, well, if I were to fall into a bad way, selling my home would be an option. And some of those homes sell potentially before they hit the market too, the traditional market. So yeah, we don't have a lot of inventory, which is what's, one of the reasons why we have such a strong market here for sales and for rentals.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it.
I wanted to touch on one thing before we go.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest pointers that I can give everybody is make sure that you budget. I mean, that is the biggest thing that I see with investors that takes them down. Oftentimes get people that are penny pitching, and you don't want to penny pinch when it's going to affect the quality of the work that's being done on your home. you may save some money right there, but in the long run, you're gonna end up making up for that money. If something breaks down, fix it right the first time. If you're doing a patch on something, you're gonna keep fixing on it. And oftentimes I tell my owners, if an appliance breaks down, sometimes it's more cost effective to just replace it than to pay $100 or $200 to fix it. For example, over the range microwave, you can get a new one for $200, or you can send somebody out to work on it for $125. And depending on the age of it, you've got to make good decisions. A lot of times people say, well, I got to watch my bottom line. And I try to explain to them that watching the bottom line isn't necessarily saving $5 or $10. Watching the bottom line is making the decision on, do I repair or do I replace this appliance? Those are the type of decisions that you want to make. You don't want to cut corners when it comes to the maintenance, because the maintenance is the number one thing that you can do to protect your asset. If you let things go, like cleaning the gutters, if you don't clean them, your fascia board, your soffit, that stuff is going to rot. You're going to spend way more money down the line if you don't stay on top of those things and make sure that you're doing the preventive maintenance items. And that's why it's important that when that rent money is coming in, set you up an account, even if it's $50 or $25, put that money aside every single month, because everybody on here lives in a house. And everybody knows it's just like a car. You've got to do something to that house every month, every week, every day. If a tenant isn't calling in work orders, that's a red flag to me. Because I know if they're not calling in work orders and they've been there for months, when they get ready to move out, we're going to have a lot of stuff, a lot of little stuff that needs to be done. So you just want to make sure that you budget for the maintenance part, because people crunch numbers and they're like, oh, I got to pay the mortgage and I got to pay the HOA and I'm charging this much in rent and I'm going to have $300 coming in. But the maintenance is something that isn't right there in your face until something breaks down. So make sure that you're setting that money aside and that you're including that maintenance in your budget.
So I know, so we're almost 2 hours in, y'all. Thank you for hanging in there. It's almost 9 o'clock. So there is another topic that I wanted us to dive into, and I'm just now realizing that we had so many property management questions that we might have to sort of move it to another conversation, but maybe I can leave everyone with homework to think about so that when we come back in 2 weeks, we can do the third and probably the final piece of this property management segment, or this 1 to 4 unit income property segment. But, you know, in light of everything that's going on, in light of, you know, there being so much interest in building wealth in real estate, I know the question comes up, how can, you know, I as an income property owner do my part in the community? I was actually asked that by one of my clients, Peter, and it was funny, I got his message right when I was thinking of trying to weave this topic into this conversation. You know, how he was asking, how can I as an owner help to avoid blight? I mean, not blight, but like gentrification. How can I make sure that I'm fostering fairness in my rental properties? You know, and those are some of the balancing questions that we all have to think about when we're owning properties. I will share my personal take on that. I have properties that are sort of starter entry level rentals. I own properties that are quote unquote, I guess, higher end rentals in this area. And I sort of balance it out by trying to do, in my mind, what, you know, and this is personal, what I feel is a fair trade-off in trying to help ensure that good people can find good housing and remain in place. I have one tenant, she's an elderly woman. I knew when she qualified for the home, she's a market tenant. She potentially could have, I was surprised she wasn't Section 8, but she was a market tenant, but she had limited income and she moved in 6 years ago. Now, a lot of folks know that, you know, those of you who might be renting, or all of us have rented at some point in our life, you know, are used to getting rental increases every year regularly. You know, for that tenant, me knowing how much she loves that home, she takes care of that home, her garden looks way better than my garden because she's out there putting flowers in, and I'm just like, wow, So over the last 6 years, I think I've only increased her rent a total of maybe 45, $50 over 6 years, which is really low. That's not much of an increase, but I have the satisfaction of knowing that I have a good tenant in a property, and I'm committed to letting her stay there however long she needs to, and I can work with her income to make that work. So is that leaving money on the table? Yes, but if I know that I have other properties over here that balance it out, then I'm okay with that. And sometimes those are the conversations we have to have with ourselves to figure out what we're comfortable with. It's, as investors, we want to maximize our return on our properties, but that return is not always monetary. And so that's something that everyone might need to just give some thought about, what are the trade-offs. Maybe on your first property, that might not be something that you can do. But because you need to make the numbers work, because actually in the next section, we will talk about how you continue to buy property after property by making the numbers work on the properties that you have. So on that first property, you might not be able to do that, but as you build your portfolio, you can start to make these trade-offs. Likewise, with gentrification, when you're going into an area that was previously blighted or lower income, and you go in and you're taking a property and looking at what you want to do with that property and putting it back on the market, you can look at what else is going on in that neighborhood, and you can make the decision, do I want to be the one that's pushing the numbers up along with these others, or do I want to create bread and butter rental housing that is suitable for middle America? Because realistically, a majority of the tenants in this country are bread and butter tenants, sort of middle America tenants who want a safe, good, clean, nice place to live. So that's sort of a trade-off decision that you can make as well. Maybe making your increase in that property more gradual versus sort of jumping to the top of the market and pushing numbers up and sort of escalating that. So maybe all of us can think about creative ways that we can be responsible in our property ownership, so that we can sort of encourage fairness and opportunity, and especially in rental situations, so that when we come back in a couple weeks, we can sort of talk about that on top of other topics. And let me know if there are any topics that you want to talk about for 1 to 4 rentals. Like, we're having this series on income property because y'all said, Tiffany, I want to talk about 1 to 4 unit properties, that survey we did a few weeks ago. So if there are any topics, my email, tiffany@tiffanyelder.com, email me, let me know. If there's someone, I'm so thankful for Germany hanging in here and answering all of your questions. If there's another professional that you would like to hear from, because I do not have all the answers, I lean to people like Germany who know way more than I do in their areas. Like, if there's someone else I can bring on here to help y'all, just let me know who that is. But yeah, I think, can you let me know just by quick comments in the chat if it would be helpful to talk about, look at the numbers and how you make the numbers work so that you can buy property, continue buying properties. Because I know, everyone looks at buying that first rental property, and then you sometimes see people who buy property after property, and in your mind, you're thinking, they must have gobs of money sitting there. And it might not necessarily be that. It's how your numbers balance out, and the way that mortgage lenders look at your numbers and how they balance out with your cash flow, that would, that help to line you up for being able to buy more property. So I'm happy to walk through examples of that. And I'm going to ask y'all a favor. I probably should have asked at the beginning when everyone was here. I actually have a video that walks through that, but I'll walk through it next time we meet, which will be week after next. I was about to say next week again. Week after next. But I have a video on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and search Rebellious Investor, which is my moniker on Instagram as well, I have a video that talks about how lenders look at the numbers and how you can qualify for additional properties after that. And we can walk through that in more detail. But I guess I'm kind of asking all of y'all, go to YouTube and subscribe to that channel, because I'm trying to figure out, when I record these sessions, should I upload it to YouTube? Like, if I know that there's a following on there that can use the info, it makes sense to put the videos up there. but take a look at the ones out there, the videos that are posted, and they're over a year old. See if those are helpful, and send me any suggestions on topics that can help. But we are 4 minutes to 9. I want to thank Germany McNeil so much. Again, her info is in the chat. Is your info up here in the chat? Yes, her email is love, L-O-V-E, the number 4, Durham, D-U-R-H-A-M, @gmail.com. Definitely send her a message. Great property manager. Thank you again. And thank y'all for hanging in there. Happy Friday, and I hope y'all have a wonderful weekend. Take care.